All right, let's jump right into this explainer and unpack the beautiful, messy puzzle that is enterprise technology. We are going to be looking at Salesforce environments today, and we're going to treat complexity not as some sort of massive failure, but as a fascinating system just waiting to be decoded. If you've ever felt completely overwhelmed looking at the back end of a mature enterprise platform, well, you are absolutely in the right place.
There's this great saying, in truth, nobody fully designs a Salesforce org. Orgs just happen. And let's speak with some radical empathy here, because we all know the reality of that 4-year-old cloned permission set that outlived its actual project by, well, 4 years. Or, that one integration user that inexplicably retained modify all data access after a frantic weekend migration and just kept it. That's the reality of enterprise growth. We don't intend to build chaotic systems, but layer upon layer, year after year, that is exactly what happens.
So, moving on to Section 1, the amnesia enterprise.
If you sit down with a mature enterprise right now and ask 3 simple questions, who has access to what, why do they have it, and is it still appropriate, the honest answer is usually just a giant collective shrug. Unless you have deep, entirely undocumented institutional knowledge sitting in someone's head, the platform is essentially suffering from amnesia. Enter the number 54. This represents the total number of mandatory controls in the Security Benchmark for Salesforce, or SBS for short. This is an independent compliance standard designed to replace that institutional shrug with a formal auditable checklist. It basically plays the exact same role that CIS benchmarks play for operating systems.
Just to give you a sense of the sheer scale here, the SBS spans 12 distinct domains. We're talking access controls, authentication, integrations, deployments, data security, and event monitoring, just to name a few. It is incredibly comprehensive. But I really want to remind you of a critical detail here. This is a practitioner-developed, community-maintained standard available on GitHub. It is not a Salesforce product, and it definitely doesn't replace your legal, regulatory obligations. It's an independent initiative built by people who know the deep pain of managing these orgs firsthand.
Which brings us to Section 2, enter the SBS standard.
You can really think of this standard as a forensic toolkit. The crucial point here is how SBS helpfully translates those massive, high-level principles you see in frameworks like NIST or ISO into concrete, ground-level requirements. While NIST might give you a broad, program-level principle about data protection, SBS writes rules directly against Salesforce's specific platform behavior. Every control gives you a unique ID, a requirement, the exact remediation steps, and, incredibly usefully, it tells you what Salesforce's default behavior is, which, let's face it, is so often the root of the issue.
And make no mistake, compliance here is a black and white binary. You either meet the requirement with a yes or you don't with a no. Partial compliance is simply not recognized. The creators made a very deliberate choice here. A standard you can partially meet is a standard nobody meets. Furthermore, compensating controls do not count unless your internal security authority has formally documented and accepted them. It is rigid, and it is totally unapologetic about it.
All right, Section 3, the legibility mandate.
When you actually read through all 54 controls, this fascinating pattern emerges. SBS isn't just about flipping security toggles. It is actually a massive documentation mandate perfectly disguised as a security benchmark. It addresses a very specific threat called org-wide amnesia. This is a state where nobody remembers why a system setting is the way it is, so nobody dares touch it, ensuring it stays wrong forever. It turns out the real danger to your Salesforce environment isn't a sophisticated hacker in a black hoodie, it is just institutional forgetting.
I absolutely love this framing directly from the benchmark's authors. It requires knowing where you stand. SBS doesn't demand immediate perfection from your systems. You don't have to fix every single flaw on day one. But it absolutely fundamentally demands legibility. It requires an authoritative inventory. It demands that you have documented justifications for every API-enabled permission, every connected app, and every single remote site.
Next up, Section 4, running a gap analysis.
So, knowing the philosophy is great, but how do we actually run a gap analysis? Well, here's a practical sequence based on how the controls cluster. First, pin your version of SBS, because the standard updates constantly and you need a fixed target. Second, stand up a system of record. This is actually control FDNS001, and it requires a centralized place for all your configurations and exceptions. If you skip this, you'll just end up doing the work twice. Third, enumerate the cheap domains, like access controls and OAuth. These are mostly metadata questions you can query pretty quickly if you have the visibility. And finally, step 4, fail honestly. Remember what we said, compliance is binary. If your inventory is 90% complete, that is a non-compliant inventory. You just have to fail honestly, document the exception, and assign the remediation.
Moving into Section 5, the AI agent blank space.
Enterprise technology is rapidly moving in a totally new direction, so we really have to ask the question, but what about AI agents? For all of its incredible coverage, the SMBS benchmark currently has this conspicuous blank space regarding dynamic, non-human identities. I mean, it has strong controls for non-human identities, yes, but those are written for static integration users, definitely not dynamic AI.
AI agents are fundamentally different beasts. They authenticate into your org like a standard integration, but they behave like an employee. And actually, not just any employee. One that works at machine speed, never files an IT ticket, and has an action surface that literally changes at runtime. Which permissions they exercise, which records they touch, and what metadata they modify are huge, massive questions that standard permission models and the current benchmark just don't fully address quite yet.
And finally, Section 6, solving for metadata.
To make an org legible, whether it's for human auditors or for these new AI agents, you have to solve for metadata. Complexity is unavoidable. It is just the natural result of scale and growth. But if the SBS requires you to map your metadata, to understand every rule, every field, and every dependency, then trying to do it manually is basically a quarter-long archaeology project. You absolutely need an engine that does it for you.
And this is exactly where adopting a continuously updated dependency graph becomes the natural, obvious solution. Tools designed to do this, like Sweep, automatically map every field, flow, object, and rule for you. By flying above all that chaos, this kind of automated engine provides the exact contextual blueprint and metadata legibility that the SBAs demands. It quite literally grants you the clarity to control the foggy cloud of your Salesforce environment.
So I want to leave you with this final provocative thought. The benchmark isn't asking you to simplify your org. It actually knows complexity is your fuel, but it is demanding that you understand it. So is your org ready to be legible? It's time for enterprise leaders to stop hiding behind complexity, stop relying on org-wide amnesia, and start mapping it out. Thanks so much for joining me for this explainer, and I will catch you next time.